Hey, what's going on everyone? This is JoeYoursTruly back with another video, and today we're actually going to be quickly summarizing the blog post they just put out for Matchmaking Improvements. We have known for quite a bit that they were going to be like putting out this blog post on today, this Monday, but there's actually quite a lot of in-depth info. Like, I just got to say shout out to JTrust and the rest of the studios for really giving us a very kind of deep dive into matchmaking, because matchmaking is kind of one of those things that you don't always get to see devs really kind of like showcasing, really kind of breaking down the nitty gritty stuff of the matchmaking. So there was some really kind of cool stuff to talk about right here, and definitely I'm someone that used to this kind of jargon and kind of like this kind of info, I would say. But even I'm looking through this, I'm like, oh, it's a little intimidating. And if I think it's a little intimidating, I think there's a lot of you guys out there who thinks that this blog post is a little intimidating to try to go into and read up on this. So my job for today is to kind of just summarize and kind of have this discussion on this blog post. I think there's some really great info right here that I want to try to make sure it's getting out to all you guys. So without further ado, let's just kind of jump straight into it. So essentially, they're just kind of like talking about how, as promised, here it is. So now let's kind of go over this real quick. So this is kind of like them just talking a little bit about skill-based matchmaking a little bit, nothing too new other than it's just it's a system that's known to work really well for the most part, but it's not always perfect. So it's kind of like, I kind of like the example they use about like the athletes and traditional will rarely score exactly the average points per game, and that's, for me, it kind of resonate really well for me, because I personally did competitive swimming for 15 plus years, and the whole like you have the best time and ideally you should be able to hit that best time or even keep improving with all the training, but it's not always the case. Sometimes you can have the best coaches, the best training, but sometimes you have that one bad race and you just fall off the mark really hard. So it's kind of like I just really like the analogy he used right here. I think it goes to show that they have a very kind of cool system. They have a system that is known to work really good, but won't always work 100% of the time. There'll be bugs that can sometimes interfere with the matchmaking that can kind of screw up like how the games are formed. And essentially, they just found like three kind of major kind of issues. Some of them were bugs, some of them were just like the calculation wasn't working as well as they hoped. So they just kind of talk about those three different issues and how they actually approach it and fix it and all that great stuff. So essentially the whole breakdown is that they try to like, when you queue up, essentially you just get in the pool of like 10 players and they try to find the most even 10 players in terms of like MMR. That's kind of like the basis of how the system works. And of course, when you factor in time of day, so there's not any people party up, if there's like party sizes that can shift and change your MMR calculations and all that great stuff. So this is the part where they actually go deep dive into like some of the issues, and like this is where they mentioned how they actually found some bugs that were unintentionally creating some uneven lobbies or make the matchmaking not as ideal as it could be. And so essentially, this is the two distinct stages I was kind of talking about. They find 10 players with comparable skill levels based on similar MMR, and then it balances those players into two fairly matched teams of 5 players. So essentially, it's just 10 people just queue up, and like it's not necessarily 10 people, it can be multiple people queuing up, and they try to find 10 people with similar MMR, and they try to like juggle them around until they find 2 teams with the best, most even kind of MMR. And so essentially this goes straight into like one of the first bugs they actually caught out, was that occasionally the matchmaking will overwrite the MMR value for a player, leading to teams not becoming evenly balanced. So essentially, there was just kind of a nasty bug where like I have an MMR value, but sometimes my MMR value could just be overridden by the system. And so essentially what that happens is I could have someone with the MMR value of, I don't know, 2500, and then matchmaking is like, oh, I'm going to give you 1800 instead. And so when you do something like that, you need to say like the whole point of trying to balance 2 teams just go completely out the window when you have someone that gets a completely different MMR value. And so essentially they found this like bug. It was actually kind of hard to find because the servers or systems were saying that, hey, this player actually has the correct MMR, when in reality that system was messing with the player MMR. So need to say, this does sound like a bug that was very hard to find, but they did found it thanks to the good work of the Tunnel team and matchmaking providers, so they were able to track it down and make that fix. And so, funny enough, this is actually a fix that already been made about 2 weeks ago on July 12th, and it's actually kind of interesting. Some of the fixes they made have been stuff they made in these previous weeks. They just haven't like actually officially made comments on it until now. So very interesting that this bug in particular was actually fixed about 2 weeks ago. And I kind of do notice that at least looking past my Almeida.city kind of history matches, that mod just been very, very balanced in terms of like the scores. So somewhere along the lines, it got fixed. So you're not going to see a 2500 average team versus the 1800 average team, at least not like most of the time. It maybe still happened. The system's not always perfect, but it definitely fixed that one bug that was really kind of leading to the screenshots you're probably seeing of like, hey, I'm like a silver player going to get the stack of diamond players. What's going on? So I think that bug is something they fixed, and that should hopefully really help out. So the second big thing that they look at is inflation. And so essentially what that means is that you have a value of MMR, let's say 1800, that's your number one, but sometimes depending on the situation, your MMR may get inflated in a sense. So essentially what happens is that so I'm trying. It's just so much. If I even have the script on the side, but this is trying to kind of a little hard to like even kind of keep up with all the great info. But essentially, what they found with is that there was some accidental inflation of extra MMR into the system due in the post match screen. So like in the post match screen, when your MMR goes up or down, kind of thing, there was some accidental extra MMR that was actually implemented, and that was mostly due to like parties, because when you queue up in parties, your MMR will of course get inflated. But I guess with the way how MMR is being calculated, it's calculated based on like the party you're in, and somehow that created some extra MMR you gain or lose. And so essentially what they did is they fixed the error, but some players may still be in higher brackets, well above the skill level if they've been partying up a lot. So if you've been someone that's been partying up a lot and you felt like after you party up and you're just going solo kill, you've been facing a lot of very skillful kind of players, that's probably due to this extra MMR you've been gaining from all these parties. But they fixed it, but your MMR may not necessarily change back to what it should be. It's the big thing to realize. So it's a great thing going forward that when you do party with players, that you don't gain too much extra MMR and go way above like your skill level when you're going against like when you go solo queue. So the last major kind of issue they were talking about, essentially the whole like party inflation when you like party in 2 versus parties of 4s and 5. So essentially kind of very kind of cool infograph right here where there's like the kind of MMR on the x-axis, and the y-axis is kind of like the calculated or predicted kind of win rate. So of course on higher MMRs, when you get into parties, you're gonna have a theoretical lot higher win rate. So you see how the 5 stack is like the highest, which makes sense because there's definitely some very tryhards that's 5 stacks only and just to try to farm MMR. So it's just one of the things where like when you party with other players, you just have that huge advantage of communication, being able to coordinate plays, or just being able to like have very strong team comp because you can't being able to shoot exactly what you want going into it. So of course you see right here that like the party size of 1 or 2 on the low end, and as you increase the party size, your probability win rate just goes higher and higher. Like this is actually an 81% win rate if you go 5 stack and 200,000 plus MMR, which is actually quite interesting. So of course, to combat this like big advantage that these bigger 5 stacks get, because that means that you have to inflate your MMR. So similar to how we're talking about how your MMR gets inflated with parties, essentially they inflate your MMR. So let's say your average of like 1800 kind of MMR and your 5 stack, that means that your MMR will get inflated. So you're probably going against people more than 1900, 2000 range. And so you kind of see right here is that like the party size of 5, funny enough, is actually lower than 4 and about the same as the party size of 3 due to the like the high inflation. So very kind of just interesting graph. You can really tell a lot about cool stuff from right here. But Essentially, the whole goal is when you play in parties, they inflate the MMR to make it more fair for the other team that are probably only solo queues or just very small party sizes. However, so they found that the party MMR works great when you're like doing sizes of 2 or 3, but they found that 4 or 5 were inflated too much. And so essentially what that means is that when you have newer players party up, I would say, like you have 5 new players party up, the inflation just goes way up. So it can be like you see right here, this is the big thing, like, is that you have a party of 5 new players queuing up around the 1400 MMR, but they actually have the lowest win rate compared to like the other party sizes. So like the big thing they found looking at all these graphs and like the kind of data in their backend, essentially what was happening is that the inflation was just too punishing for newer players. So of course, when you're very high MMR, the inflation doesn't matter. You just kind of steamroll because you're very, very good players. But when you're like someone that's very new, that's trying to 5-stack with buddies, trying to have a good time, your party MMR was getting inflated too much to the point where it just becomes really unfun to play with your friends because your MMR was getting inflated like way, way too much. So essentially what they were trying to do is that in version 0.9.1 that they're gonna work on a new party adjustment calculator, but essentially before the MMR inflation was being calculated just on team size. So like it's kind of like a fixate kind of finite numbers. So like you have 5-side, 4-side, 3-side, you get inflation of these numbers, right? But now with this new system they were talking about, now it's going to be both on party size and average MMR based on how much your MMR is going to inflate, which is actually quite interesting. Now I would have thought that if you party up with other people, you're always going to like it's going to take into account of your party average MMR, but it wasn't actually doing that in the first place. So now they went and improved the system. So now that if you're someone that's very new and you're playing with your buddies who's like 1200 MMR, now when they inflate your MMR, they're taking into account of your actual MMR win. So instead of like a 5-stack of silver players very new to the game going against diamond players, it should kind of translate to more like 5-stack of silver players going against like gold players, maybe high silver players. So that's kind of like what I got from this, and that's actually really great news because a lot of people complain that they can't play with their friends, so it's kind of hard to do so. And so with this system they're pushing out in version 9.1, but it's gonna be like a lot better, I would say, to kind of play with your friends, not to worry about your MMR being inflated way, way too high. And so like I guess you can sum up for this fact that inflation, you get in when your party size at 5, you get small adjustments on the lower MMR spectrum, but when you're a very high average MMR, you're gonna get bigger adjustments for inflation and making sure that it's more balanced evenly as it should be. But yeah, that's kind of like the big 3 fixes, improvements that we're making from that. So I do hope that I do a good job kind of like summarizing that for you. But outside of that, there's some other kind of cool info is that they did mention that there are regional and time of population constraints when it comes to matchmaking, and I definitely do feel that because I do recall a lot of videos more afternoon, early morning for NA East, and that's definitely when the total people's playing are actually on a lot lower end. So kind of funny enough, I feel like my matchmaking is actually kind of like higher quality when I'm actually playing with a small population, but as soon as it gets to NA East prime time with thousands of players, a lot of players like playing, that's when I feel like my MR gets a little bit wacky or like it just gets a little inconsistent. So they do mentioned about like how your MMR it's gonna be kind of mess up a little bit depending on the time of day you're actually going with. Because the big thing is, they mentioned somewhere in the post, like I can't really find it in the moment because obviously there's just so much info, but essentially the whole goal of the system is they're not trying to prioritize the best, most even matches, they're trying to get you the most fair, even match while also getting you into the match at a fairly decently timely manner. So like I think one issue that Overprime was having is that they were very, very strict with the matchmaking to the point where like you can be seeing queues for hours and not find any matches, even though there's like hundreds and lots of people playing because your ML is way, way too high. They were waiting on find people that similar MMR to match up with you. So that's a big thing I think people need to realize is that sure, the MMR could be even more strict and like how this being calculated, how the teams are being put together. But for the most part, they want to make sure you actually get into the games and enjoy the game. So they're trying to find that fine balance, getting that really kind of solid MMR, even matches, while also making sure that you don't syncate for 20 minutes. It should be more like average 5 to 10 minutes if you're on the higher ends. But yeah, they're just talking about they look at player feedback a lot, just kind of like just a little bit more info and all that great stuff. I just want to focus more on the three kind of big issues they found, like bugs they found, and improvements they made with that. So hopefully with this new patch 0.9.1, that's when all these like new systems will be in place. Like some of them are already in, but some of them it's going to be put into place with the new patch, and that's when I think we definitely need to keep an eye on matchmaking. I'm definitely gonna be keen on trying to figure out or pay attention to my matchmaking, and that it is something that feels off. That's something that I take a look at, and something that's actually a big deal. That's something that I try to get into a dead phase, right? Because like these are some really promising, cool changes, but it's not the end to the improvements for matchmaking. It's always a constant process. Things will always get iterated on and improved on over time, especially as we get closer to the full release when we're gonna go for a scale of 1,000 or so players to now tens of thousands of players, 100,000 players hopefully, and that's when you're probably gonna have to change your MMR calculations like again to take into account going from small population to a large population. But yeah, this is some just really cool info. And so I just want to like kind of summarize the three kind of big highlights I got from this because like I said, I think for someone that's kind of looking at this post for the first time, they make it a little intimidated. They're like, okay, I'm seeing all this great info, but am I actually understanding it right? So hopefully I kind of give you that great kind of breakdown and info on kind of like the three big issues. I might even do like a summary of it in my description below. So if you want to see kind of like a more short and concise summary of the three big things, definitely check out the description below this, and I'll just kind of have that up so you guys can kind of read it again if you guys want to like making sure you get this info right. But really great stuff. It's very awesome to see that they're putting in a ton of effort into just being transparent and letting us, keeping us in the loop of what's going on with matchmaking, because a lot of people love to talk about matchmaking all the time. So definitely it was very cool to see them actually being very open about it and be like, hey, we have these issues or bugs happening, but now we're making the fixes and making the improvements. So definitely let us know if matchmaking is improved or there's still issues. Definitely let us know, kind of thing. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of more info kind of video. Let me know if you actually want to see this more often, where I'll kind of break down this kind of stuff more often for you guys, if it's actually helpful for you guys to understand some of the more technical details. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Monday. Peace.